Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to be adding our speakers. Hi.
Hi.
One sec. Let me just add our speakers. Is it loading for you too?
Yes, load in for me.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Hang in there. We're just going to be adding our speakers for the next few minutes. We're very happy that you're able to join us tonight. Great.
Hi.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, I'm clearly not as tech savvy, so
No, it's a struggle at first. Um, let's see. Dr. Lifchez, can you hear us? Okay, so for us it shows a loading sign. Let's see if this works.
Mhm.
Still have a couple minutes, so um it might be the Wi-Fi or some sort of connectivity issue because it's showing like the ring. We can't see or hear you, but we see your icon and it's just showing a loading sign. Let's
Oh,
try one more. Oh,
there we
perfect.
are.
Oh
Um,
my God.
we're good now. I'm going to change my perspective so the light's not in the background.
Okay, yeah, no problem. We'll get started in about a minute.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Glad it's working.
How's your day? How's everything going?
Thank you.
Okay. Um, Still have our audience members joining, so we'll give them one more minute and then we'll get started. All right. So it's hit the hour. Um, Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight or this evening, based on where you are, for our interview tips Instagram Live in collaboration with the Garnes Society. We're so excited to have our amazing speakers here today to answer all of our questions. And we're just going to start off with introductions and then we'll go into each category. So we have understanding the interview process, the prep and presentation, common pitfalls and professionalism. We have another category where we have different types of questions and then some final advice and conclusions. So I'll start off. My name is Nithya. I'm a medical student at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn. I'm a medical student at UNC Chapel Hill.
And
I'm
for our speakers, can you introduce yourselves, your name, where you are in your career, program affiliation, all of that good stuff?
I'm Haig Yenikomshian. I'm the program director at the University of Southern California.
I'm Scott Lifchez. I'm the program director at Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland.
Thank you so much. So I'll start off with the first question. Just a reminder for the audience members, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and me and Jocelyn will try to squeeze them in at the appropriate time. So our first question is, what is the overall purpose of residency interviews from a program perspective?
Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
Either way.
I think for us, the application process, everyone has fantastic applications and it's really hard to pick. And then I think the interview process is to see whether the applicant would be a good fit for our program and whether they like our program.
I think that's a good answer, and I agree. It's not just for the program to sort of get some sense of in person, and obviously, like one day in a high stress environment for the interviewees who didn't do a sub. I recognize there's limits to how well you'll know us and we'll know you. Um, Certainly, applicants tell me they get a lot of value out of just sort of walking the halls of where they'll be. 6 or 7 years is a long time to commit to someplace. And in the 2 years when we were all virtual during COVID, like there was a definite like, I'm not quite sure what I'm signing up for, I think in both directions. And then the other perspective is it's a chance for not just the program faculty, but also the program residents, the people who are going to be your co-residents for the next 4, 5, 6 years, to get to know you as best as they can in a day and just try to get a sense of does it feel like a good fit. I agree with the statement that you're all really talented people. You have really impressive looking applications. But any given individual may thrive better in one environment than in another, and we're at least trying to help identify that.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great point about it being one day out of the entire application journey. So it can be stressful. So hopefully we can get more insights on how to make it less stressful and how to be more successful during the process. Jocelyn, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really good segue into the next question because you both alluded to how many applicants look strong on paper. So, what qualities can help a candidate stand out, especially when there are so many applicants that are strong
So, do you mean on paper, or do you mean in the interviews, or do you mean both?
in the interview?
So, again, trying to get a sense of who you are as a person. Um, Tell me about things that interest you, not what things that you think will sound impressive to me when you say they interest you. And at least in our program, keep in mind you're not just going to talk to me, you're going to talk to nearly all of our program direct faculty, our chief residents, and then between interviews, you're going to talk to all the rest of the residents. And again, get a sense of like who are the people here who you're going to be with, what is working here like. Um, and then, I don't know that it matters to me all that much who your favorite baseball team is, or if you like whatever your hobbies are, or you were, near professional level of playing an instrument. But as best as we can, try to, give a sense of you as we ask you questions, trying to get a sense of who are you beyond just the grades you got in your third year clerkship, beyond just the number of your publications.
Yeah, I think what you just said really sums up exactly what I was thinking too, is authenticity is the word that I look for in the interviews because if you have an interview your application is good, and I know that academically you're doing well. What I want to know is, can you be a doctor? Can you be a human? Um, and it's hard to do it during an interview. It's one day, they're very polished people, but are you authentic? Are your questions or your answers are you thoughtful about how you're answering those? Or did someone tell you this is how you should answer, and that's why you're answering that question? And so we just want to train people who are human, who want to take care of patients.
That's great. Yeah, really showing your personality essentially, and using this opportunity to show who you are outside of the paper application is what we're kind of hearing. Um, the next question is, what are programs evaluating that applicants may not realize during the interview process?
Um, I think that's a hard question to answer because every program will be different. Um, I want to make sure applicants treat everyone with respect at the medical center. And so, if you're rude to staff, if you're rude to the people who work the front desk, that will come back to us. And so, because you don't want someone like that in your program, because if they're doing that on interview day, they're going to be like that even worse after they get accepted. So I would say that's the one thing, but usually people should have insight enough for that to know that.
And the limit, I agree with all of that. And the small amount I'd add is just, your interactions with everybody. Even though my PG ones and twos aren't going to interview you, they're going to take you on your tour. They're going to talk to you at the interview social. And I don't want to give people the sense that, you're being under a microscope for the entire time that you would be in Baltimore with us. But again, these are the people who would be your co-residents for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and they want to get a sense of like, okay, is this somebody who I can have, a reasonable conversation with at, 7 a.m. on rounds, at 2 a.m. when they're calling me from the ER, as best you can. And again, recognizing that when we're all in our suits dressed up on interview day, it's not the same as when you're in scrubs calling at 2 in the morning, but getting a sense of who is going to thrive in the environment. There are also differences between programs. Some programs put a heavy emphasis on research. Others, you can do it, but it's not as emphasized. I think all the programs will give you good clinical training, but they may do it in different settings, whether it's urban versus rural, large team versus apprenticeship. And all of those are things that you can hear, when you talk to the residents. And I think there are also things that they're thinking about when they talk to you. And I'm thinking about it too, but again, recognizing that I may not be who you're calling directly from the ER or doing sign out with at night. I think those are all things that both the applicant can gather from the people they talk to, and then I will talk to everybody who talks to the applicants, because I value hearing how all those interactions went.
Yeah, I mean, an anecdote about this is we had an applicant who was kind of bossing our residency coordinator around on the day of interview. And our residency coordinator is fantastic. And she was like, yeah, it was just a little bit of a weird interaction. He was telling me, oh, I'm going to stand here and then I'm going to do this. And that's a perfect example of like, read the room. Like, that's really not what you should be doing. And you just don't have insight. So,
Yeah, I definitely think it's really important to have that situational awareness and also just to be kind to whoever you interact with, even outside of interviews. But this is really great advice. Um, so our next question is, how should applicants prepare effectively for interview day?
I guess I would just start with know what's in your application. If you put it there, presumably it's true. You might get asked about one of your hobbies. You might get asked about one of your community service projects. You might, if you wrote your essay about, I did an international student work somewhere, you might get asked about that. Um, know your, know yourself sounds very superficial and sort of highfalutin, but like have an answer like, oh, I see you did this. Tell me about it. Whether it's social, whether it's community, whether it's research, whether it's academic. And again, we're going to ask you that because, oh, I saw that on your application. That might be something interesting to know more about you. We want to know. Tell us.
when I when I talk to the Gen Z, I like to talk about how this is like dating. And so if on your dating app you say that you like hiking and then you come to your interview and we want to talk about hiking and you know nothing about hiking, that's problematic. And so we had an applicant who said they love to read books, and we're like, "What is a book you read lately?" And she was like, "Oh, I haven't read a book for 2 years." And we're like, "Why did you put it on your application then?" So, you got to be honest. And know your research. So if you're first author on a publication and you can't tell us about it, it's a little weird.
No, that's really big. Knowing your application. I'm just gonna touch on this question because it's a great segue into kind of what we're touching on right now. What are some common mistakes or red flags you've observed during interviews? I know we touched on kind of being kind and then also not putting things on your application that you're maybe not being 100% truthful about. But if we can kind of go more in depth about what other red flags or mistakes you've seen, that would be great.
I guess I'll go first on this one. Um, have insight about yourself. There's the question on the application, and an interview may expand on like, tell us about something that went poorly. Tell us about something you made a decision, you realized, oh, I made a bad choice. And please, and when you come back with an answer like, oh, I got a high pass on this rotation instead of an honors, like, that it's not that it's false, but it misses an opportunity to tell me something about that. Whether it's, oh, I delegated something in leadership in a group and I realized like I didn't do my fair share and it suffered because of that. Or, all of these questions are opportunities for you to tell us about you. And if you stay superficial, at the very least, it's a missed opportunity. And maybe if it's even a lack of insight, like, hey, this is your 12 minutes with me to help me get to know you. Tell me something real.
Yeah, I think people can put up walls during the interview and don't answer honestly. And it's okay to have mistakes in your applications. If you don't honor surgery, just let's talk about it. Why didn't you honor surgery? And you say, I didn't study for the shelf exam, or I really miscalculated. But what I did after that, because it pissed me off, is I studied and then I honored every other service. Like, have some reflection and you can talk about things. It's the people who put up the walls and kind of just have rehearsed answers that it's really difficult to assess whether or not they will be good doctors. Because we all make mistakes.
That's great insight. Because a lot of the times as students, we try to prepare and make sure that everything appears perfect, but maybe touching on some of our things that weren't so perfect and showing our humanistic side would actually benefit us. So that's great insight. Thank you so much.
Yes. So I think another good question, how should candidates handle difficult questions or moments when they might stumble?
I think there's difficult questions and there's difficult questions. Um, there's a no-no questions where politics, religion, stuff like that. Like, you don't have to answer that. That's actually something you probably shouldn't answer. But if you get a difficult question that I think is valid and fair, we want to see how you approach that and tackle that question. So even just the process is important to me. So if you're reflective and you're mature about it and you're thinking about it, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Have an answer. It's a balance. If you give too succinct an answer, it can come off as polished and fake. But we also don't want to sit there for a minute where you're like, huh, I don't really know how to answer that. So, have a response that feels true to you. Explain it as best you can, as was said. Like we know you're not perfect, and by the way, if it's on your application, we already know it. So you're not going to surprise us to say, oh yes, this thing that was on my application that I got a pass in pediatrics or whatever it is, like that's there and it's okay, and we still wanted to talk to you. Um, so again, if we're gonna talk for the moment about like when we say tell us about something that went badly, like have a real answer, and that tells us about you. Again, trying to figure out, are you somebody who's going to come to where each of us is and like come here and thrive and have a great 6 or 7 years with us because that's the person who we want to identify as best we can in the high stakes one day that we get.
Bouncing right off of that, touching on the part where you mentioned not sounding too rehearsed, but also not stumbling, how can students present their story authentically without sounding overly rehearsed in terms of like preparing and um, practicing?
I think you got to be true to yourself. So the applicants who stumble are the ones who are trying to answer the question in the way they think I want them to answer the question. It's just, this is back to the dating thing. You wouldn't do that on a date. Don't do this during the interview. Just be yourself and think about it. Like, clearly, I don't want to know everything about you. I don't want to know what happens during spring break, but I do want you to be authentic and thoughtful when you're answering the questions, and you don't always have to answer it the way I think you should answer it.
I think that's a good point. And you can do sort of if you're going to do a mock interview with somebody, I would honestly frame it as more of a mock conversation. I wouldn't want somebody to imagine, okay, this is the question I will ask. Here's my one paragraph response, because that's probably going to come off as inauthentic. But oh, you wrote about your mother's breast cancer diagnosis. You wrote about when your dad lost his job and you had to move. What was that like? And imagine that you would have a conversation like that. Someday in about 10 years, when each of you are done training, you're going to do your old board exam, and we're going to ask you to tell us about a patient in an environment as if you were sitting talking to me in the lounge. Imagine this question I'm asking about, whatever your history that I'm asking about, is that environment. What would that look like if somebody that you knew a little bit was trying to get to know you rather than you're being grilled at a job interview, which I realize this is kind of a job interview, but again, we have a very limited time to try to get to know something of the real you to know if we think you'll fit in where we are.
That's great. Thank you.
Um, so with that, what would an ideal answer length look like for interview questions? Specifically for questions like, tell me about yourself, why plastic surgery, just because those will probably be the most common ones people encounter.
I think it's so hard to answer that question. Um, I think this is a emotional intelligence read the room situation, which is something we're evaluating too, you know? Like if you have word salad and keep on talking for 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, but so just got to read the room, read the cues from the because when we interact with patients, it's the same way. When you're seeing a consult, you got to read it and you got to play back and forth with the patient to try to get information out.
Yeah, I agree. I'll give you the extremes of don't give me a yes or no answer and don't fill 10 minutes with one answer. But beyond that, chances are I want to ask you a couple of questions, not just one. And, an interview will be 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes. So somewhere in between, but I agree. I don't want you looking at your watch. Oh, it's 37 seconds. I need to be done now.
I think the applicants who do bad on interviews are the ones who have that mindset.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna remind the audience one more time. You can ask questions in the chat box or in the question box. I do see the question about research, and we'll get to that towards the end while we focus on interviews for now. Thank you so much. So our next question is, are there certain topics or approaches students should avoid during this interview process?
I mean, politics, religion, I think those are the two.
Guidelines. I mean, again, it's if you put it in your personal statement or one of your short answers, you've said it's okay to talk about, so we might. But otherwise, I agree. I don't know that those are the kind of values that are necessarily relevant to residency, so I agree. I'm not going to ask you about those either.
Great. I can also ask this next question. Um, what types of questions do you appreciate hearing from applicants? Kind of towards the end when you ask them if they have any questions for you.
I think thoughtful questions where I know that the applicant has thought about our program and whether or not they would fit in the program. So questions that are relevant, not generic, not AI generated, to see how what I'm thinking or what they want to think about the program.
I agree. I don't think it helps to try to be too prescriptive, but you're going to get some amount of introduction at the start of the day. We all have websites. Most of the programs have Facebook and Instagram and whatever else. So there's a pretty good amount of material about the program. Um, but yeah, what are things like, from a sincere standpoint of like what don't you know yet? Whether it's, what do people do when they leave here? Although that's probably going to be in the intro presentation, so maybe that's not a great example. Um, but again, like it's the whole point of us talking to each other for 10 or 12 or 15 minutes is for us to learn things about each other that we didn't already know.
Thank you. Um, we see a question in the chat box. Jocelyn, did you want to ask this one?
Yes. So this question says, could you please provide some of the non-traditional questions you like to ask?
Mm, I think it's so applicant dependent. So, I read the application, I take notes, and then I tailor my questions based off of what they've told me. So it depends. It's on the personal statement, it's on the hobby list, it's on their research, it's on their extracurricular.
I agree. I don't have much to add to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question again in the chat that says, any tips to ease the nerves of interview day? Does being nervous reflect poorly on the applicant, or do interviewers tend to understand?
I think it's okay to be nervous in the sense that we recognize this is a high stakes day. Um, to the best of your ability, as long as you can keep your nerves contained to the point that you can have a conversation. Again, that's what we're doing all day is we're having conversations. We're showing you around our hospital. It is okay to be nervous, if you're a fidgeter, try to contain the fidgeting, that sort of thing. But again, as long as you can hold up your end of the conversation, we understand this is high stakes. We understand that there's an imbalanced power dynamic and all of the things that go along with the job.
I tell applicants, med students who get nervous in general, to find the scariest attending at their home program and do a mock interview with them. And so for us, it's Warren Garner, and I say go meet with Warren Garner. Let him just be himself. You'll get used to it, and then everyone will be great from then on. So that's my advice. And they don't need to be plastic surgeons. If there's a general surgeon, a scary chief resident, just say, hey, for 20 minutes, can you just annihilate me with questions so that I can practice being nervous?
I
It's a
think
good
that's
point.
really good advice.
I know this is dumb, but don't drink too much during the social event if you're nervous.
Oh yeah, that's an Eli really, really.
Seems
Okay.
logical, but have to say it.
So then I'll give you an extreme version actually from when I was a chief resident and somebody was interviewing at my program. Hopefully there's not even the opportunity, but I'll tell the story anyway because I still think it's funny. Where I trained, we used to have the interview social in the rec room in the basement of the chairman's house. And there were like tables and ping pong and stuff like that that people generally had the wisdom not to do, but there was also an upright piano in the corner of the room. And one year, one applicant thought it would be cool to just sort of sit down and play a lounge act. Don't do that.
Were they good?
I mean, they had reasonably good piano skills. They had very poor awareness of their surroundings.
That's funny. So we have one more question, or we have a couple more questions. Just for the audience members, we'll ask their questions first, and then we'll get back to our documented questions. So in the comments, there's a question on how should we navigate sounding cocky versus underselling oneself while answering questions.
It's a fair question. I think it is okay to say something that you accomplished and you're very proud of, especially if you can talk about the steps that led up to doing this. I did X type of work for 100 hours, and this is the success we achieved. It's okay to be proud of your accomplishments. We may follow that up with, okay, tell us about something that went really poorly. We expect you to be equally forthcoming with that. I think those are kind of good, emotional, intelligent ways to handle it. But it is okay to be proud of something that you achieved, especially if you can talk about the work you put in to achieve it.
Yeah, I think it is a fine line. I do think for the most part, I would say 85% of med students undersell themselves rather than appear cocky. Um, I think the best people to give you that advice is your mentors throughout this process and ask them what they think. And I think if you ask them directly about this, they will tell you if they're good mentors. Because I've had this conversation with the med students who work with me, because some of them I'm like, you got to pump the brakes. And for someone like you are not selling yourself enough, you need to do it more. And people external to you are the ones who probably will be able to tell you that best.
That's great advice,
Really,
actually. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, I think that's a really good point. Um, our next question asks, are there any traits or answers from previous interviewees that you really were wowed by during the interview? And they said they understand that it's applicant dependent, but anything you're happy to share.
I love a good comeback story. I love the application where if you screwed up, you realized you screwed up, and then you just worked your butt off and accomplished a lot. So
I don't have a better comment than that. I like that.
Great. Um, okay, so no more questions in the chat for now. So we'll get back to our documented questions. Let's see. So if an applicant feels strongly about a program, what is the most appropriate and effective way to communicate that interest to the program? Should students send thank you emails? How would they go about that?
I think it's kind of plus minus, and remember, there's the ACEPS policy about communication. And so, you at once upon a time, my advisor told me to send thank you emails, so I did. I have no idea whether it did any good for me. Um, I think it's okay to do. I don't think there's anything negative with it. In theory, you've already done this when you signaled. Um, and up until your interview day, you are allowed to have people communicate on your behalf by ACEPS policy. Once you are through the interview day, there's not supposed to be communication. You can solicit factual information from the program coordinator. Wait, tell me again how many months you spend in the burn unit and stuff like that, but there's not supposed to be communication between an applicant and a program after the interview happens. So you can do it beforehand. In theory, you could do it the day of, although I wonder just about the logistics of making that feel sincere rather than insincere. But that is a way to do it. And similarly, before your interview day, if you really are sure this is the one place for you, you can have your mentors reach out on your behalf. Keep in mind, if you have your mentors reach out to 5 places and say that each of them thinks, your place is the best, we are not a large group and we may talk to each other. And if 3 of us hear that each of us are your favorite one, that will not be held in your favor.
yeah, I think a good mentor will tell you that they will reach out to one. Just so you guys know. So if a mentor is calling 5 people and saying they're the top program, that's not a good mentor. Um, And I think thank you notes are silly and a waste of time, especially with the ACAPS rule where we're not supposed to contact you. So you do not need to write me a thank you card. And I think the contact too is, we're following the rules, so I don't talk to people, but mentors do contact the program. So, and that is, if it's thoughtfully done after interviews are all done, because I agree, if you tell me on the day of the interview we're your first choice and you have 10 other interviews left, that
That's helpful. Um, so one more question in the chat. Should mentors make calls on our behalf before or after the interview?
I don't know that there's a right answer to it. In theory, if it's after all the interviews, well, then you really have made your decision who likes the most, but it sort of bumps into the ACEPS communication rules, even though it's not you, it's somebody on your behalf. If you do it too early, then do you really know the program? I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that. I do get emails and phone calls at various points. But I don't know. I have a strong feeling about when it happens. There's pros and cons to each time point.
I feel like if a mentor contacts me before the interview and that person has not subbed with us, that would be weird because you haven't actually interviewed with us or seen our program. So how would you know?
Good point.
I mean, it's different if, oh, this person's fiance works at USC or they're in Los Angeles. Like that is different. Like just a heads up for that. That's different and that's helpful to know. But otherwise,
Thank you. Um, Jocelyn, did you want to ask the question in the comments? It's the one on the structure of the interviews.
I'm sorry, they weren't coming up for me.
Okay, I can ask it, no worries. Um, can you talk about how your interview days are structured in your program and what your evaluation process looks like after the interview?
we do 15 interviews, 15 minutes each. There might be one or two people in a room. And then we score and just chat about how good of a fit they will be.
Pretty similar. We typically have 18 people in a day for about 12 minutes. We'll have various people in the program tell you about various facets of it for the beginning of it. We'll walk you around the hospital. By policy, we actually have to score you in the absence of each other, and then we do talk about fit after the scoring has occurred.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, we don't score in the room together because there's bias for that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I think the next question we have is um, how do applicants best address things like a leave of absence during the interview?
Tell me the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
not to overstate it, but like, hey, my student loans didn't come through. I worked for a year, or mom or dad or somebody got sick and I had to be a caregiver, or I just wasn't sure between college and med school that I wanted to be a doctor, and then this happened, and I mean, there's any number of answers that could be a good answer, but it needs to be your answer. Again, it's an opportunity to tell me who you are, and that will help me try to figure out, does this seem like an environment where I think you'll succeed?
Yeah, I think you got to be honest, and that's fine. And if you're not honest and there's a wishy-washy story, that's when it's like, okay, like what's going on? Like, oh, like this happened and 3 months and just like, no, no, just what happened. One of the applicants, mom had cancer, needed to go to chemo 3 times a week. It was emotionally stressful, and he's like, I needed to take 3 months off. Really sad story, perfectly understandable.
Thank you so much for sharing. Um, this next question is how are applicants' activities, especially research, typically brought up during interviews? And when responding, how should applicants avoid simply summarizing what's on their application? I'm also going to throw in the question about how many first author and total peer-reviewed publications are expected. That would, yeah, in the chat.
I guess I'll start with the last part first. By the time you've gotten to the interview, you've already cleared the bar. If you didn't clear the bar, I'm not inviting you for an interview. I may ask you, what was your role? And it may mean that I want you to tell me about when your Western blot didn't work because your second antibody was screwed up, or the rat bit you when you were doing whatever. Like, again, if I'm going to ask you about it, I want to know more than the abstract of the paper. I certainly expect that you will know the abstract of the paper. Similarly with an activity, if you say that your leadership role in some community organization or you worked in this type of job, and I think, oh, that might tell me about your grit or your organizational skills, your follow through, tell me. But anything that would be a cutoff, you've cleared it, or I didn't invite you for an interview in the first place.
There's no hard and fast rule for research and how many publications. We want a diverse group of applicants, a diverse group of residents. So there's going to be the resident who does a ton of research. There's going to be the resident who's a community organizer. There's a resident who's going to be great at morale and spirit. And so um, there is no hard and fast rule for that. And if you have an interview, by that point, you've passed the bar. Um, and the questions during the interview process, I don't micromanage the rooms. I don't, there's no, it's not like the oral boards where the questions are kind of standardized because I want you to have organic conversations with the different attendings and residents because that's what being at our program is like. And so, can you have a conversation with the residents? Can you have a conversation with all the attendings that you're going to work with? Um, and it's not going to be like, oh, what is this abstract? Tell me what the data showed and what's the p-value. Like, that's not how interviews work at all.
That's great. Thank you. Um,
So our next question is, how should applicants approach unexpected or unconventional interview questions like hypothetical scenarios or what would you do if sort of situational dilemmas?
I mean, I know we're saying give similar responses, but like, I want to know how you think. You know, this and such happens to the patient in front of you, now what? Or your friend calls you and says, I need X, Y, and Z, now what? Like, that is the point of those questions. And you know, give me as honest of an answer as you can um, that tells me about you.
Completely agree. I think that's what you need to do. Just be honest.
that's great. Thank you. And then in the chat, touching back to this, after the interview, what is the appropriate time frame for a mentor to reach out to a program on an applicant's behalf?
Well, at the very least, you need to know when our list is due. Don't miss that. Um, and I don't remember what date it is in March, but it's some date in March that the lists are due a couple of weeks before match day.
It might
Uh,
be even late February.
might it be? Okay. I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact date this year. Um, my program does, and I suspect many programs probably have their final leadership conversation sometime before then. Um, but that still typically leaves you a month. I mean, there's a pretty decent time interval between the last of the interviews, which tend to be early February. There might be some stragglers after that, and when the list is due.
I would say by mid-February.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's, so our next question is, what is one piece of advice you wish every applicant knew going into interviews?
I would say to be yourself. I've said it multiple times though, so I was like, do I just say it again or not? But be yourself.
I guess I'll phrase it this way. We are already considering you as somebody we might want to rank, or we didn't, or we wouldn't invite you there for the day. We have many more people who look really good on paper than people we can interview. So if we invited you to interview, you deserve to be there. And again, then to what you just said, with that in mind, be yourself. We're trying to figure out if you're a good fit for here.
And do you have any reassuring or final thoughts on staying grounded and confident throughout the process for our fellow applicants that are joining in today?
I find that med students overthink the process. We're not sitting in a back room in the dark with cigars being like, oh, we got this person with this question. That's not how this is. We're just trying to see if you're human and are going to be good doctors. And so just, it is not, we're not trying to catch you or trick you. This is just to get to know you guys. And I think once you realize that and take a step back, it'll be less stressful.
Get a good night's sleep. If you're a reader, bring a book. If you have, portable hobbies, think, that which will relax you and help you feel comfortable the night before, and then come in and be you.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
do have more questions rolling in, so we'd love to ask them if that's okay. And audience members, um, if you have any final questions, please feel free to ask. Um, so we had a question about whether the calls from the mentors move the needle.
It depends. Has it ever? Certainly. Does it always? No. It depends on what are they telling me other than so and so really likes you. But maybe it's a piece of information, whether it's their significant other is applying to another program, whether it's oh, didn't know if you know, but they like this particular type of research that you do, or in Baltimore they like Maryland crabs. I don't know. I'm being silly with that one. Uh, but I don't know that I've ever seen a mentor phone call or email cause harm, but I've seen them be neutral, again, depending on who it is and what they have to say.
Yeah, I don't think it moves the needle much. It might move the needle a little bit. Because you want enthusiastic residents who are excited about your program and you're excited about them. But I mean, it's not going to move someone from like 12 to 1 by any means.
I agree.
I mean, because we're trying to make it an unbiased process with scoring and different people. And so as a PD, the last thing you want is to make unilateral decisions in the middle of the night because it does destroy the process.
That's fair. Thank you. Um,
So we have a question. After all interviews are done, how do you choose which applicants to rank highest?
I don't know that there's any one characteristic that trumps all other things. We've looked at how you did on your clerkships. We've looked at how you did on your research. We've looked at how we thought your interview day went. We've looked at who said what about you in your letters. I don't think there's any one thing that matters, and we're trying to put that combination of, okay, all of that makes, here's what I think of the individual that I just spoke to. How close are they to what I think will succeed well here? And even that, to your point, is not necessarily one individual. There are a lot of different types of individuals who have thrived in my program. So, and I'm sure that's true of yours at USD as well.
Yeah, I think I trust the process and I really trust the opinion. So once you get to interview day, it's almost like a reset in my head. And so I really listen to what the faculty have to say, what the residents have to say. And then after that, I will make a couple phone calls to the writers, any professionalism issues you want to tell me on the phone, something like that, just to make sure. And, I would say 98% of the time, I've never had anyone say, yes, I need to tell you something. So, because I do think the being PD, it's an honor to be PD, but you got to listen to everyone around you as well. And so I don't try to ruin the system because you need the insight of the entire program because this person is joining the family. And so everyone in the family needs to have buy-in on that.
Um, there's a question about for prelim year applicants, how do they navigate kind of the process of reapplying and if there is any bias or anything that was maybe not perfect on their application before, what can they improve upon during the process?
I think that's hard to answer on an Instagram live because I think everyone's application is so unique. And if you didn't match and there's a reason you didn't match and you corrected that in the next year, great. But if you're just applying again and everything's the same, that's hard.
I do think there's less of a stigma of not matching than there was 10 or 20 years ago, only because there's so many good people who want these spots. And I agree it matters. What have you done in the last year? So one doesn't match in March. The new applications are due end of September, so 6 months have gone by. If you do a prelim year, and I've had occasional mentees who didn't match, and what I tell them is if you're going to go do a prelim year, be the best intern that program has so that your program director can say, this is the person I can count on. This is the person who immersed themselves. Because again, then that actually tells me a little bit about your doctoring skills as opposed to your potential for doctoring skills, which is what we have with most of our applicants because you haven't been a doctor just yet. If you really didn't have research and it seemed like that was a deficiency and you spend a year doing research, have your research mentor talk about your engagement with it. You may not have many more publications between March and September, but again, whatever it is that you've decided is worth a year to try to make something that wasn't as good as you want it to be, do it, engage it, be present for it, so that those who are watching you do it can talk about that engagement. That has the potential to make it, to your point of what is different this year. That's what I'm looking for. What is different?
Thank you.
Really good point. Our next question is, logistically, what should applicants bring on interview day?
A
I see a
suit?
lot of
I
people
don't know.
bring like a folder to put notes in. My impression is most programs still give you some sort of folder that has a map of the campus, maybe your rotation schedule. Ours actually requires us to give you salary information of what the current year's interns made and benefits and stuff. I do see people write down notes. I think if that works for you to remember who you talked to and what they said, I think that's fine. I don't think you have to do it. Um, yeah, I agree. There's not like a must have other than like, you know, comfortable shoes and dress appropriately and that sort of thing.
Okay, and then our last question is for non-US IMG or international students. Is there any hope to directly match into plastics without a research year or prelim year?
It's hard. I mean, and it's not hard because of bias against people for being international. It's just hard to know what kind of environment you've been in. It's hard, if your grades are numbers or they're letters. It's hard for me to know the context. As it is with American applicants, it's hard enough because some med schools don't give third year grades anymore. You either pass or you fail. So that's the part that we're trying to figure out now. Maybe you know someone who I know who I can sort of trust their judgment about you. That's the hard part about an international thing. It's not impossible. I have international student or former international students who are now residents in my program. But that's the hard part of it, is trying to figure out how have you done so far, because I'm so much less familiar with the environments that you've been in. So it's not a bias against, it's a lack of information.
Yeah, I think, I read through all the applications this year, and there are very few recommendations commenting on clinical environments for this group of applicants. And that's what makes me anxious, is I have no way of determining how they are as a doctor. And so, at least with the prelim year, they have clinical recommendations. And so even with the researcher, that's hard because there are people who only got recommendations from people who did research, and that's a different skill set. And so I don't know what I keep on saying patient, but applicant's bedside manner is, because no one's evaluated them and put that in the application.
That's a great point. Thank you. So there are no more questions in the chat. This is the last call. Um, so our last question is, I guess for the applicants who are applying this cycle, there's a few more steps remaining. Do you have any general advice on kind of what, kind of the remaining steps in the process? Like, do you have any general advice on that?
I mean, we've talked, so you're talking about for the fourth years who've already received their interview invitations. Is that the
Mm-hmm.
question?
Yeah.
I mean, this far out, you've already made your choices most likely about where you're going to interview, because that happened 2 Mondays ago. When you go to places, again, you are interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you. Think about how you felt in that environment. Does it feel like an environment where you'll thrive in? People can go to U.S. News or NIH research funding rankings, and all of those will give you numbers, but not necessarily a relevant reality. The reason that you took the time to spend the day with us to do the interview is to try to get a sense of, does this feel like the right place for me? Think about that when you are done with your interviews and making your rank list. to the best of your ability. Again, it's a single day trying to get as good of information as you can.
I think every year I yell at the med students about their rank list because they call me and say, I think I should rank this program because it's more prestigious than that program, but I liked that program better. And every year I have to have this conversation which says, no, you should rank where you will be happiest at. And so the rank lists help the applicants rank where you want to go, where you think you will be happy and most successful. Because if you're unhappy at a prestigious program, you're going to be a bad resident. And just go where you think you will be most successful and happy. And just take a step back from the US World News ranking, take a step back from the prestige and think about what program works for you. Because for some of you, a smaller program might be better because it's more intimate, more family in a smaller town. And you got to think about those things to be successful.
I agree.
And
That's
every med student goes through this when they make their rank list.
Thank you so much. I think you've given us all like such great advice about just being yourself and trying to treat the interview as a conversation. Um, so it's been very helpful to hear.
I totally agree. We really appreciate your time and your insights. You obviously have seen many students, so it's always great to hear from you. We really appreciate it. Um, I think that's all we have. Is
Yes.
there a question in the chat about, or oh, there is a question. Um, Sorry, I'm just gonna ask this one last question and then we'll call it a night. Um, do connections to the program or school move the needle on if you get an interview?
I mean, well, for this year, that's already happened. Limitedly, again, the connection where it moves the needle is usually because you've worked with someone I know and I have some sense of what their perspective on you means. It's all well and good if you have family, in the state or in the greater community, and maybe that means you'll have better support and you'll be better grounded. I don't know. But connections in the institution, the main value of that is if there's somebody who I have some knowledge who I can ask additional insight about you. So maybe a little, it depends.
Yeah, I don't. So if you're a USC student, you're probably going to get an interview. But connections to the program or school, no, because in my dating analogy, if you know you're not going on a second date, why are you going on a first date? It's not fair to the applicant to spend money to fly to Los Angeles, get a hotel, and it's not fair to the interview, like the faculty, to interview someone when they're not going to come. So if there's no chance you're coming, it's not going to move the needle. We just won't give an interview.
Okay. I think that was our last question. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, hope you're able to enjoy the rest of your night slash evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.